Is my brain broke or am I just too literary? We think that we could do so much better. How could you mess it up this bad? It's like there's no one else in the room while you write out of your ass. Is my brain broke or am I just too literary? Am I insane, bro, or am I just too literary? Too literary.
Welcome to We're Too Literary, the show where we identify as experts.
But we're not.
As we deep dive into the world of cinema, uncovering plot holes, dissecting character arcs, laughing at the absurdities, and spoiling the shit out of everything you love and hold dear. I am your host, Kenny.
And I'm Jonathan. Each week, we'll take a critical yet humorous look at both the classics and the latest releases. Whether you're a film fanatic or love a good laugh, join us as we navigate the twists and turns of movie magic gone awry and give you our ideas of how we'd like to do it. Are our brains broke?
Or are we just too literary? Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of We're Too Literary.
Yes. And what are we talking about this week, Kenny?
This week, on the precipice, is that the right word here? Yeah,
I think so. Although technically it's going to be slightly after.
True. At this point it's out. Time Bandits. We're talking about Time Bandits. We're going to be talking about the 1981 Time Bandits.
Correct. Which is the inspiration for the 2024 series on Apple TV, which is written and directed, at least the first few episodes, I believe, by Taika Waititi.
Which is awesome because I know he gives me a lot of faith in being able to make something stand out when you kind of expect that it might not turn out how you want it to. Especially, and just right off the bat here, the biggest difference between the old one and the new one doesn't have they're not dwarves. The Time Bandits are not dwarves, and this is the original's an entire cast of dwarves. Yes it is. And that
is a change, and I'm curious, maybe they bring it up in the TV series, maybe they don't. Well, who knows? We'll watch it at some point and find out.
It's such a bizarre change to me, but of course, not having watched it at all yet, I really can't speak to, if they made it a point that they changed it,
Correct. Maybe we should have done a little research, but the other kind of ancillary interesting thing is there's the live action Snow White movie they've done. They haven't released it yet, as far as I know. I don't know when they're planning on releasing it, but same thing. They changed from the Seven Dwarves to a whole different cast of characters.
No way. Really?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
So kind of an interesting little connection there.
Interesting. I wonder. I'll have to read into that. That's that's an interesting choice. Well, yeah. So today's about the original 1981 Time Bandits by Terry Gilliam. The story of this movie is very simply put. We're not gonna bore you with a long recap of exactly what goes down in this movie. We'll just keep it really simple this time. A young boy accidentally joins a band of time-traveling dwarves as they jump from era to era looking for treasure to steal. That's the synopsis straight out of IMDb. And that is, frankly, the movie.
That's really all you need to know. I mean, they go visit Napoleon and Robin Hood and King Agamemnon, but realistically, it's them stealing a bunch of shit and jumping through time. It's the third act that, it takes a half hour into the movie before you find out what's going on exactly, involving the map that shows the different portals through time and how the dwarves are figuring out where they want to go. But it's not till the third act that they're going to, fight against the supreme evil and try and save the day.
Yeah. And maybe it was just a product of the era, right? Because it was the 80s. And I mean, Power Rangers was in the early 90s.
It was the 90s.
the supreme evil and his lackeys to me just felt like a Power Rangers villain. Like we're talking Rita Repulsa, but inversed.
Yeah, it was
with all her goonies.
Maybe it's the progenitor of Rita Repulsa.
Yeah, maybe.
But the supreme evil is very like H.R. Geiger, I think is how you say it, like influence in that weird kind of like phallic-y, oozing, alien gross way.
He was weird, man. There was some so that was who played Evil Genius was David Warner. Okay. And he did a great job as this evil genius. He was just, it was odd. It was interesting to say the least. I don't really know how to address it other than to say it was just odd enough that it felt evil. There was multiple points of him just using magic to
kill his minions.
Silly things, torment them. They were all for it. They were excited. It was like, it
was a little BDSM there.
Yeah, you get where I'm going with that.
Yeah, really more S&M, I think, not BDSM. But it was weird. It was real weird.
Every time they got punished, they were pumped.
Yeah. Awkward.
So, man, how do we quantify this story? It starts off meeting Kevin. Kevin's a history buff of a kid. He has inattentive parents who don't really care about what he's up to. They think that him
way more
all
interested in like the gadgets in their kitchen and watching TV.
Yeah.
Which was some kind of game show, if I remember right.
It was the game show, and then there was something about one of the appliances in their kitchen almost being Back to the Future-esque, where it was like, oh, they can just put a little cube in the thing and it'll pop out a meal of some kind. It was like sweet. The pizzas in Back to the Future, they just drop that little
second
pizza.
One,
yeah. And then bam, got a full-blown pizza. And I remember the mom commenting about it in, oh yeah, our neighbors or friends or whatever have this really nice one that does it in 6 seconds, whereas ours does it in like 10 seconds. Man, it'd be nice to cut out those 4 extra seconds.
So ridiculous.
It was so ridiculous. And so Kevin buries himself in his history books, and then one night while he's laying in bed sneaking a little read on something, the Time Bandits show up.
Yeah. And remember, before that, like, we have this random knight breaking through the closet and then disappearing into a wall, which really sets the stage that he's just got a really active imagination.
Yeah. Or a Narnia wardrobe.
Apparently. I mean, that's where the Time Bandits come through.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, with the knight going out the wall, it kind of displaces that a little bit. But yeah, it did feel like an overactive imagination at first. And of course, they play it off that way. The kid's like, oh, yeah, whatever. And then the next time it happens, it's the dwarves, and they handle it so nonchalant too. It's just like, oh, he saw us. Oh no, don't worry, it's fine. Just stay in bed, relax. It's okay. How would you feel? As a kid? I don't know. I'd be hollering if there was a whole troop in my room.
The one thing I think the movie did a great job of, and you have to really view it through the lens of a kid. Like, it's this really just rompy adventure movie. And yeah, I think as an adult, we look at it and we're like, that just looks weird and we wouldn't do that. But if you were a kid and a bunch of like dwarves show up and then run through a wall, be like, what the fuck? What the hell's going on? Let's go find out.
Exactly. You got to suspend some disbelief
really
here, right?
Speaks to just the child, which makes sense. There's so many details about it. You're like, as an adult, it's like, it fucking needs to make sense. This is some bullshit. None of this works. What is wrong with you people?
Right. You got to suspend some disbelief there in order to really get through it, at least initially. And of course, again, like Jonathan mentioned earlier, there was a really long period before we actually kind of get the gist of even a little bit of what's going on. I checked. It was like 35 minutes into the fucking movie. And that's when they're getting chased out of the bedroom, right?
No, that's when they get to
Napoleon.
I think it was after they raided Napoleon.
Okay.
They're in the woods at night. So that's when they fight, and it's revealed they have this time map, and they're raiding different time periods using the map. And they're dwarves that have helped the supreme being, and now they've been kind of shunted to fix these things. And they wanted to go just make a name for themselves.
Right. And I guess for me, I felt like the plot started to take a little bit of shape as they were trying to escape the bedroom as Kevin. That's so weird that his name's Kevin, because this was at the same time as Home Alone and such. But as Kevin's trying to make the decision about whether or not he wants to run along with them. And of course, with the supreme being trailing closely behind, you're left wondering, what else are you gonna do? You just gotta run, kid. You can stay and find out what's gonna happen, but
it's a giant floating head. I'd be fucking terrified of running away.
Yeah, and that's where it got really Wizard of Ozzy. Yes.
Well, the whole movie feels like a Wizard of Oz type thing, but at the same time, we have the fantasy with the knight, who, yes, comes through the Narnia wardrobe and then disappears through the same wall that Kevin then goes through later with the dwarves. So It very much definitely feels like Wizard of Oz, but at the same time, not enough there to kind of cement it, I would say. At the very end, we see King Agamemnon as one of the firefighters. As we'll skip ahead in a second. Or we're skipping ahead now. We see the actor return, kind of like we do in Wizard of Oz, where the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion were all the farm hands and people around Dorothy.
Right.
But we only have that one connection. And I think, at least the way I would have done it is, I would have expanded a little bit more and had, Napoleon or Robin Hood show up as one of Kevin's teachers or something. Show Kevin at school daydreaming and fantasizing and thinking about history, and Napoleon or Robin Hood is his history teacher. Just to build out that Narnia a little bit more.
It would have made a little more of an interesting plot to suggest that all of these people that he encountered throughout his journey actually end up being people that he's known from his regular day life. Yeah. And we only really got Sean Connery as King Agamemnon later as the firefighter, right? There wasn't, I don't remember anybody else getting revealed.
I mean, unless it's some kind of background character in a scene that wasn't even drawn attention to, which could be possible and we missed it, but
could be
King Agamemnon or Sean Connery as King Agamemnon and the firefighter rescuing Kevin are the only connection that I made.
Interesting. There's not a lot of connection to any other character that we see throughout the journey, other than that. And it would have been a little more fun to see a few more of those connections being made. Like you said, if John Cleese ended up being the teacher, or maybe a neighbor, even just something to tie that in a little more.
Agreed. What a change I would do a school scene and have John Cleese as the history teacher teaching about the death of Agamemnon.
Yeah.
Something that way we Kevin's there. He's kind of fantasizing, daydreaming, but he's also learning. because history's his favorite thing, and it kind of ties it together. But it also brings in a change I want to make later, in which Kevin knows how King Agamemnon dies, and he saves him. Because one issue I have with this movie is they go fucking traipsing through time and no changes are made to the timeline. They go steal shit and do
So
all sorts of
much.
things and
So
nothing
much.
happens. And you know what? I can't. You go traipsing through time and there has to be repercussions. There just has to be.
This all falls back to our time travel shenanigans discussion that we have yet to fully unleash. But yes, I too believe that there really can't be any changes made in time without there being some sort of catalyst somewhere else. Like, you make one change here and it's going to affect the course of history because that event no longer occurs, and there are, infinite possibilities of what could have happened differently from that point. So, to your point, with them stealing so much of Napoleon's treasure and then traveling through time with it, and then Robin Hood and his merry men take it and give it away to the poor. What? Wasn't the Mona Lisa in the pile?
I don't think it was the Mona Lisa, but I could be wrong. It was some other. It was a painting, though. There was a painting.
I feel like there was an important painting.
Probably.
It makes you wonder, like, okay, all right. But I mean, forgive me for this because I legitimately don't know the Robin Hood story outside of just watching the old, Robin Hood Men in Tights. Not that one's accurate by any means.
Great movie.
I remember the Kevin Costner Robin Hood, and then of course Robin Hood from the Disney stories. But I mean, that's not a historically accurate story at all, right? Like, was Robin Hood a real tale?
No, Robin Hood's not real. I mean, there's a lot of folklore involved here, but no, Robin Hood is most likely not a real figure, which then is amusing that they're going traipsing through time and now he's real, which also lends to the whole is it fucking real or not aspect. I mean, as a child, you're probably not thinking through this that much. And that's okay. But your kids watch shit with their parents all the time. Let's give the parents a little something to reward them for their effort of watching this movie.
Sure. We'll get to the surprise ending when we get to the end of this, kind of this discussion and everything. But with the way that it ends as well, really leaves you wondering, like, what part of this was real? What part of this was real and what part of it wasn't? Because Kevin's a history buff. If Robin Hood is not a real character, now I'll grant you, a lot of folklore is based on tales of, potentially real individuals who did things, and somebody was like, okay, I'll make up a story around this, loosely based on a true story kind of situation. And so maybe Robin Hood is based on some figure in the past that did steal from the rich and give to the poor. But Robin Hood himself lends to this story wait a minute, is this historical or not? And with Kevin being such a buff behind it, you'd think he'd call it out. He doesn't. You'd think he would, but also I think they killed Napoleon. Sorry, I just want to mention that real quick. I'm pretty sure that it was arguably that they killed him. Like, I'm trying to remember if he just drank too much or if they
got drunk and passed out and then stole everything and ran. Or maybe I don't remember them killing him. I just remember them like passing out.
Okay, maybe that was all it was. I do recall him just like slumping over, and it's like, okay, do you really steal all that stuff without anybody noticing, without any commotion?
Okay, I mean, yes, that it ties into the whole. This movie has a distinct lack of consequences, and yes, people will pass down. The dwarves will just ransack and steal I mean, think about it. They were walking through the fucking crowd of soldiers. And it took like halfway through for them to be like, oh, they're stealing shit. Stop them.
Yeah.
I mean, The movie is bonkers. And I mean, I enjoyed it for that. But I got to have just a little, like, I would have, again, another change is having distinct consequences. I would have shown like a world at the end when Kevin wakes up in his bedroom. I would have had the camera pan across like a world map that showed like France now part of England because Napoleon failed in his conquest because, you know, a bunch of his riches just got fucking jacked and his soldiers mutinied. And so England ended up conquering more. But yeah, then we might have pissed off the French.
And I can lend some credit to this movie for just trying to be fun with it, right?
It was, yes, it is trying to be just outright fun.
And for the product of its time, it wasn't like I was rolling at everything, but I did find it entertaining. It just wasn't like over the moon entertaining for me.
Sure. Yeah, this is why we're too literary, Kenny.
Yeah. Yeah. This is why where we're going to offer up some ideas of how to do it, maybe just a touch different. But there was that moment with it was Shelley Duvall, and I trying to remember who she was with. She played Dame Pansy.
Michael Palin. He shows up a couple times, I believe.
Okay. And
or was that
how they were such an interesting ad as well, because they're just two in love,
two
seem like
super
royalty,
horny in love people showing up throughout time,
right? And they get their carriage knocked over, and then they get tied up to a tree. And then they get left there, and we revisit them at one point during the story, and they're still tied up in the rain. And I just don't know why, other than to be funny about it. But it was also like,
it had to just be funny, because I mean, the guy also has like erectile dysfunction.
Yeah,
repeatedly. It's like, oh shit, this is a problem.
Yeah, and eventually the whole troop, like the Kevin and the dwarves, all walk by them in the rain as they're having their clothes stolen by other bandits, and they just walk past, like, don't worry about them, it's fine.
Yeah, just moving on.
It makes you wonder, like, okay, the consequences of your actions. And yet this is the thing you choose to ignore. Like, you don't have any consequences we've seen so far. So you're choosing to, you could have saved him. You could have tried to do something, but no, they just left him. And they, it was like, fine.
Fuck him.
Around that point, I think we're finally introduced to the evil genius. And yeah, he's a weird looking dude. He's got weird mannerisms. He treats his goons
hardcore S&M
with disdain and torture and what have you, and they're all happy about it. They all had like horns on their head and like saran wrap wrapped around them. I thought that was a really interesting style choice. And that's where we finally like start to see some sort of an antagonist that isn't just the supreme being, which we're at the time thinking is an antagonist. It's very fragmented to me, and they're only really running from the supreme being with the map. Of course, like the whole point of them running from the supreme being is that they have the map that lets them travel through time and lets them know where the rifts are going to be so that they can be in the right place at the right time to pass through. And then it turns into a bit of a plot about the evil genius trying to swindle them out of the map.
He wants the map so he can go conquer time. Yeah.
And right after that is when we're finally introduced to King Agamemnon, which Sean Connery's bit was great, but again, very fragmented. It didn't explain a lot.
No. I mean, you got to love a Scottish actor showing up as a Greek king. It's always fun.
And I'm trying to remember, was his voice was still pretty his usual voice?
Oh, yeah. Sean Connery has one voice. Sean Connery's voice. That's all he's got.
Yeah, that's all he's got. But here he was for it. And his fight with the weird...
With the Minotaur.
Was it a bull? Yeah, it was like a Minotaur. Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially. Right.
Yeah. It was a dude wearing a boar's head, but it was I think it was supposed to be the myth of him fighting the Minotaur or something. And it was just a dude wearing a boar's head.
Yeah.
With, I think, a tail on him as well.
Yeah. And honestly, the scene itself, for being part of an early 80s PG movie, was mildly violent.
Yeah.
I mean,
PG was different back then.
It was very different back then. Like what passed for PG and PG-13 easily could have passed in some situations for a full-on R-rated movie. But yeah, it was fun kind of seeing this fight, and then how Kevin just appears out of the sky instead of on the ground like they had with all the other portals, because Kevin just falls on top of the Minotaur right as he's about to finish off the king.
Saves. I don't know if he did save him because he stopped the Minotaur and allowed the king a chance to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. Like when he fell on the Minotaur guy, it made him stumble enough that the king was able to finally, pick up his weapon and
stab him in the gut, if I remember right.
He ends up kind of being more of a father figure to Kevin than his own father, right? And
so much better. Like, he's attentive. He teaches the kid. He fucking kidnaps him in the middle of the night. A little weird there. A little weird. This would have been a very interesting thing to keep around a little longer and expand upon, because agreed. Especially since Kevin was like, did not want to leave. When the dwarves fucking showed up and kidnapped him, he did not want to leave. Which, I mean, we have a whole nother weird plot hole of there's two doors open when Kevin leaves Robin Hood's forest to get to King Agamemnon. One of those portals seems to be created by the supreme evil, or whatever, evil genius. Is that what he's called?
Evil genius.
Evil genius.
You think that was okay?
Yeah. One of them was created by him. One of them was the appropriate one. I'm assuming Kevin goes through the appropriate one and shows up to King Agamemnon. The dwarves then still end up in the great time. Whatever. Giant plot hole. Not going to worry about it. But I think a cool thing, and I would have added here, would be to show that, yeah, Kevin's a history buff and knows history, and we can change shit. He would have saved King Agamemnon's life, because, like, if I remember right, he's betrayed by like his wife or something, and then that's how he dies.
Yeah.
I looked this up and I'm vaguely recalling. I would have had Kevin tell Agamemnon and end up saving his life, which would have showed that history can change. And then, yes, him being named the heir and trying to settle into a life here, only then to be fucking kidnapped by the dwarves, who are at this point just a bag of raging dicks.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually the lead up to, it was almost as if they were trying to write in we can't change anything major event wise, because when Kevin is kidnapped from the celebration that happens with King Agamemnon, and the dwarves show up, they kidnap Kevin from there. That was at the point of where you're already seeing those shady looks from the queen. She's plotting to finish the king off, and maybe that was part of Kevin's motivation to stay behind. I don't know. He doesn't really speak to the history that he knows.
Correct. Well, that's where
a whole lot.
I want him to. I would, if we're gonna have a fun romp through time, let's just change shit and make it fun. Have him have a scene where he tells Agamemnon what he knows, and then Agamemnon banishes his wife or kills his wife or whatever, and history is now changed, and Kevin's named his heir.
Yeah, and to your point, one of the biggest things that I feel like is necessary to change for this story, for this plot, is the fact that as a history buff, this is a big moment for lots of opportunity to make those changes and see what could happen with it, what could be the consequence of it. And it is important to keep those consequences, because if you don't, then it just feels like you have the freedom to mess with anything and not have anything bad come of it, which of course everybody out there that dreams of time travel, I'm sure, wants exactly that, to be able to mess around with time as much as they want without it changing or without it affecting anything. But when you're supposed to be a history buff and you have that knowledge, I feel like it is a great storytelling opportunity, if you're going to ignore consequences, to say like, oh, let's call it out. Let's have Kevin point out these moments, talking about them to the various persons of interest in the time frame that he's in, to kind of be, oh, hey, did you know that you're going to die? Somebody's going to try and assassinate you. Somebody's going to try and do this. Somebody's going to try and do that. Or, oh, hey, this is located here and you guys don't know about it, but we can go find it now because I know based on the future.
we're back to this being like a kid's adventure. As a child, you're not going to be like, oh, I can't change time because it's going to fuck everything up. If you're traveling through time, you're just going to do whatever you're going to do. It would be very in character for Kevin to be like, hey, bro, this chick over here, she's going to murder you. You should do something about that.
And I feel like that's what's important to remember here, is that this is a kids-oriented movie. So not all of it can really be done the way that we're describing, because if it's going to remain a kids movie, you got to be able to at least keep the kids interested in history. As much as I love it, can be perceived as a bit dry, unless you, and I guess that's where you could make it more interesting and more fun by having these passionate moments of realization and excitement around, oh, we know this is coming, so we can go do this, and then rallying people behind him to go make that happen. Like having, instead of maybe shifting things a little bit from just being time bandits stealing everything in different eras of time, to being helpful in certain ways about some of the stuff that they encounter through their journey. After he leaves King Agamemnon's era, I'm pretty sure that like led us on to a ferry where all the dwarves were dressed. They were suited up. They were all fancy like, and they were smoking cigars and sipping on whatever.
Sir.
What?
It was not a ferry.
It was
not
a boat?
A ferry. Well, I mean, it was a boat. It was a ship. It was a
ship.
Real big ship.
Don't tell me it was the Titanic.
Yes. There's
how did I miss that?
That says USS Titanic SS Titanic on it.
I must have been looking away from the screen at the time. Holy shit. But also the fact that Shelley Duvall's character and her beau show up on the ship as well. It's like
the Jack and Rose before Jack and Rose were a thing.
Okay. Yeah. Them randomly showing up also just kind of left me going, wait a minute, how are they here too? How does this make sense?
I loved it.
And then
I loved it.
Why couldn't we have John Cleese show up somewhere too? Oh my God. I am just now remembering that there was the whole, like, it started sinking.
Yes.
You're right. I don't know why I didn't. Total memory lapse. I forgot that, like, they're in the water, basically Jack style, hanging onto the edge of a board, and oh, forgive me, everybody.
Maybe that was the inspiration for Jack and Rose and the way they go down.
Could be. I mean, that movie came out in what, 1999 or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
And then we meet the ogre, and
Is it? Yeah. Well, because yes, this is when they decide to go to the time of legends or whatever, and they fall in the ogre's boat and nearly get eaten, and then trick him and send him overboard, and a whole
They
fucking
fix his
mess.
back.
And yeah, and then set him into go sink or swim with the fishes.
Yeah. I loved that what got him to like them was that they reset his back, made him feel better, but then also tricked him into jumping off the boat. And he's just happily in the water, like, I feel great. Right before they figure out a way to knock the wife off the boat as well. She was the one out of the two of them that I felt was truly the evil one.
She was rather vicious. And I love that she was just a regular human.
Yeah. Regular human in love with an ogre with, two jutting teeth.
Yep. On a boat that is somebody's fucking hat.
Yeah.
A fucking giant's hat.
Yep. And again, we break the wall of actual history to folklore again, or at least fantasy.
Yeah. I mean, they go back so far. It's the time before history. It's the time of legends, I think they called it.
Yeah.
And this is how they get to the evil genius's lair.
Right. And the whole time, oh man, I remember in when they reveal what was the giant and the boat being his hat and everything, and Kevin sticks the billow in his head. It was filled with something like something to make him sleepy. And they just stab it in the top of his head and pump it.
Yeah, they tear the boards open to reveal the scalp and just it's ridiculous.
Which is it looked painful. This is where the plot moved into more about the finale of things, where we're going to be dealing with the evil genius and then eventually the supreme being. And I don't know, it still just felt so it jumped all over the place. It just jumped all over the place. And while I get it, it's like you're jumping through time and doing different things. I just wondered, other than to show an adventure, how did it play into the plot?
They were tricked there by the evil genius who's trying to get a hold of the map. That's why they end up there, because they're obviously just trying to steal shit. And they're like, ooh, the time of legends will have the greatest stuff to steal. And
they hope.
And it's a non sequitur, just imaginative, child adventure. That's why I'd make it want to tie in further to this idea of a Wizard of Oz type thing, where maybe it was all a dream, maybe it wasn't. You could go either way. We kind of had that when we discussed the Late Night with the Devil.
Yeah.
It's a theme that reoccurs because it works from a storytelling standpoint, and it leaves it up to the audience to decide whether or not it actually happened. But you have to give clues both ways. And I feel like the movie kind of did that, but didn't do it enough, whether that was the intention or not. It's where I would do more. I would want to tie that a little bit into the story more. Have John Cleese show up as a history teacher in the beginning, show the world map where England now owns France. I'd even do, so after we go through this adventure at the end where it's a romp through the castle, being chased by the evil genius, being locked up, doing some fucking dwarf swinging nonsense from cage to cage. Just like, how the fuck? You dwarves are strong.
Yeah.
And then they end up with that final confrontation where they're bringing in cowboys, a tank. They even bring in a spaceship from the future.
Yeah,
all fail horribly. All of it.
Yeah. So leading up to the actual evil castle bit and everything, I thought it was pretty cool how at that point they're at odds with each other, and one of them's thinking about taking over as leader and demands the map, and the other one throws a skull and it shatters the glass wall in the area that they're in, revealing this honestly pretty cool evil lair, like big evil tower, castle. What I found odd about it is it's like, it's an evil castle. It's not going to be fun times going in there. And yet they get very easily tricked by the callback to the game show host from earlier in the movie, right? When they're watching the TV. The game show host comes traipsing down the stairs, like doing his little bit, and then asks for the map, and they just hand it over willy-nilly. And that's how they get caught and thrown in their suspended cages, where I was just like, oh, all right, sure. We'll accelerate things along here by just showing this very strong lapse in judgment. This movie was about almost 2 hours long.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was an hour and 56 minutes.
Oh, damn.
And
I did not realize that.
One of the big things I want to ask you at this point is, in order to flesh this out further, I feel like it would actually make the movie longer. It would probably end up being closer to 2 hours, 20 minutes, maybe even call it an even 2.5 hours. What parts did you feel just didn't add anything? I know this is tall order trying to remember.
Well, I mean, I think it could have been more productive with its time. Like, you could have shown, it, like I said, it takes a half hour to get into the plot. Maybe it still takes a half hour to get in the plot, but you develop the characters a little bit more, and, leave like one of the scenes of the scene where he's tricking his parents and going to bed early. And we develop a character with, the history teacher and stuff there. Maybe we leave out the Robin Hood, to give a little bit more time. I mean,
I love John Cleese,
go longer. I don't know if we would need 2.5. I could probably see 2:15 and just, trim a little bit of the fat in places. Some of the scenes run maybe a little bit long or aren't as necessary.
Yeah.
But you want to keep some of that kind of like high adventure romp.
Sure.
Otherwise, you're if it's too tight and too focused, you're probably going to lose the kids, which is the whole point of the movie, is for the kids.
Yeah. Yeah. It really kind of is, right? And so, yeah, like you mentioned, we got to see the cool climactic moment of finally encountering the evil genius and putting up a fight. Some people get polymorphed. I remember one of them turns into a pig, and is running around as a pig. There's a whole bunch of like spooky Minotaur skull, or not Minotaur, but like, the long faced horn, scary,
weird, like skull people chasing them.
Again, for its time, like if this was meant for kids, there was some spooky stuff that happened towards the end where I was like, all right, that's a little.
Well, you also have to remember,
Dark
Crystal was meant for kids.
That's true. And Dark Crystal was dope.
Yeah. And it had some like ridiculous, character designs.
Yeah, that whole battle happens. You said we got to see the tank. They brought in even one of the dwarves bit the dust. They got smushed by a big old column. At which point the Supreme Being shows up.
Everything they threw at the evil genius was worthless. He easily defeats him, kills one of the dwarves, kills every single one of the people they brought from time to help them. The tank turns against them. The jet ship turns against them. So it takes the Supreme Being showing up to be like, no, I'm done.
And don't forget, he had some weird thing happen where his like dome opened up and something elongated out. And oh man, I don't even fully remember like, but it was weird.
Super weird. Super weird.
Yeah, I can't even begin to explain to you what the evil genius really was in terms of a entity. He was bizarre. But like, also too, I get it. He's the evil genius. If you I would have allowed, for me, how I would have written this portion of it differently is that I would have allowed for something that they brought, something that they did to be the thing that defeats the evil genius. Because it feels just like a little bit of a cop out to say, okay, this guy is so powerful that you all are, you're just fucked. I'm sorry. You guys aren't going to win this battle. It's a wash. And then the Supreme Being shows up and he's like, I got this. Don't worry. I'm here in the nick of time to save you all. It's no big deal, because he does resurrect the dwarf that gets crushed.
Yes.
And so it's like, all right, there was no real danger here. They just needed to wait long enough for the Supreme Being to show up, which begs a big question for me. If the Supreme Being is so supreme, how does it take him so long to get to where he needs to go?
Because he fully admits this was all his plan. Remember?
That's right.
Wanted the dwarves to steal. He wanted the dwarves to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I would actually tie into it a little bit more of it's an ultimate like cat and mouse game between the evil genius and the Supreme Being, which I think the show might be doing this. I've read a little bit of the synopsis. There's the Supreme Being played by Taika Waititi, and I think it's
he the Supreme Being?
Yes, he's the Supreme Being. And then there's the devil character, which is probably the evil genius. And I would do just for the movie, I would have done like an eternal cat and mouse. They're fighting against each other, order versus chaos, good versus evil, light versus dark thing. Like in the end, it's two sides of the same coin. They can't exist without each other. So yeah, Supreme Being shows up, nullifies them, destroys them, but evil always persists, and that's what this little chunk of rock gets left behind because the dwarves are not as good as they should be in cleaning up.
Sure. Well, and I pulled up the movie decks real quick just to look, because knowing that Taika is the Supreme Being is awesome. I think is Jermaine Clement the bad guy? If he is, then his name is Wrongness.
I don't know.
Yeah, his name is straight up Wrongness, which I think is hilarious. Well, you take a quick look at that. Yeah, I mean, I guess like I would have allowed the heroes to be heroes here and figure out a way to maybe surprise the Supreme Being by being the ones to actually figure out a way to defeat the evil genius, as opposed to him showing up and being like, this was my plan all along. You are stone and dead now because I can do whatever I want. But there was also just kind of like the why of it all was vague. You're right. He does explain it, but he explains it in such a way that I was just like, is that all? There was no greater purpose here? What's the deal? And
the purpose was the adventure we had along the way, Kenny.
Yeah. This is what happens when you really get into the weeds of trying to understand why a movie was done a certain way. But Kevin wakes up back at home. There's a fire engulfing his home, and he gets saved by none other than Fireman Agamemnon.
Yes.
Because they only refer to him as Fireman, which this was the part that we left out earlier, because it was just such a weird thing. But we did find, Jonathan here found a interview from Terry Gilliam himself about why this particular event unfolded like it did. But the parents are so not concerned about their kid. He gets out, safely, and they're bickering about their appliances.
Yep.
One of them runs back in to grab effectively the toaster oven, and then it's got evil inside of it. The cooked evil is inside of this toaster oven, and he shouts to his parents, "No, it's evil!" And then
they touch the lump of evil coal, and fucking explosions. The parents explode, which, yes, upon first viewing, it's like, what the fuck? The parents are explode. This kid's now an orphan, and everyone's just like, they go on their way.
Now, and I think it would have been a nice, sweet moment here. So, like, this is how the movie ends. Yep. This is how the movie ends.
Panning out on Kevin standing there on his own.
And the fire truck going away. And yeah, he's just standing there on his own. And it's like, okay. So he's just, like you said, orphaned. And he looks very confused at the camera. Or at least, would be. Past the camera. And he's like, Mom? Looking at the smoldering embers of what his parents were. Just, they're gone now. And that is literally how the movie ends. And I was just like, what in the world is happening? It pans out into a big satellite view going all the way out till we see the good old blue pearl of Earth into the universe. And it's just such an odd ending. Now, you found the interview with Terry.
Yes,
and
I did.
He had what to say.
Essentially, it's an ending that speaks to kids, because the kid is like, hey, don't do that. And the parents are like, I'm going to do it anyways, not listening.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, as an adult, you're like, no, that's fucking stupid. But as a kid, you're probably like, yeah, parents should have listened. The kid knew better. But no, nobody ever wants to listen to the kid. And it works on that level. And I get it. I do. Yeah. And like, as we did the research for this episode and sat down and talked about it, like, I have grown to enjoy the ending, but my change here would have been probably a little bit of twofold. One, I probably would have had a dwarf kind of just show up, scurry up, and like clean up the stone and disappear again. And I would have also had like a little voiceover from the Supreme being chuckling as we have some kind of character, like a police officer or something, obscure Kevin from camera for a second, and then he's just gone.
Yeah, that would have been great.
Because my tension here is, before the fire breaks out, when Kevin wakes up in his room, we pan across the map showing that France is now part of England because of the hijinks that Kevin has gotten up to. Would have also shown some kind of history book or something talking about how Agamemnon lived and had an heir. My implication here is that the Supreme Being takes Kevin and leaves him with Agamemnon in the past, where he wanted to be left earlier.
Yeah, this honestly feels like a callback to our Indiana Jones episode, where it was like leaving Indy in the past would have been a great send-off for him, despite the fact that changing time has consequences, at least in the Indy universe, it seems. But we'd also suggest ignoring that there. Yeah.
Correct. Here, there's consequences. In the Indy universe, the way they did it is time is fixed. Whatever's going to happen has already happened. Whatever's going to happen is already, like, you can't change anything. So if you were to go back in the past and do something, then that's always what has always happened.
Right.
That's just, you can't change history. Everything's predetermined.
Right. It was, destiny, so to speak, or what have you. The way that I would have changed the ending, I like yours a lot. Mine might have been just a little bit more conclusive, I guess, in that you see his parents blow up. Everybody in the neighborhood's just standing around acting like, oh, we're looky Lewin, but this just happened. All right, cool.
Yep.
I would have had it have been the firemen are still there. We see Fireman Agamemnon looking over and seeing what, because the parents blew up and they just left. How does that make any sense? Right. And so I would have had it so that he was still there. He witnesses the same thing that Kevin witnesses, is like, has some sort of a connection with the kid based on, maybe some sort of like weird time connected. I feel like I know this kid, and you can come to the station with us and we'll figure things out, and kind of leave it to the viewer to assume that maybe, Fireman Agamemnon takes him under his wing, and that, he finally has an attentive figure in his life that's actually there to care for him and pay attention to him.
I get it. Yeah.
And I do agree that like having the dwarves kind of reappear for a brief moment and doing some of that would be a very interesting way to keep the story in a place where it could continue, that there could be more Time Bandit related shenanigans.
It would be fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, our viewers should post in the comments letting us know which ending they would prefer of the two. Or how they would have done it.
Honestly, we'd love to hear anybody's take on how they might have done this differently. That's something that we're really striving for here, is to just open up that creative flow of, you have just as much ability as we do to go out there and say, I'm going to do this in my own way. I'm going to change it up, and I'm going to make it something that might be a little bit more enjoyable, might be a little bit more realistic, whatever. But
yeah,
we all have that creative power in us to just say, I'm going to do it how I want to do it. And so we'd love to hear some of your guys' thoughts on that. It'd be really fun to see what y'all have in mind.
Let us know. We'd love to engage. And I think what we should also do, so the series is a quick burn. I think it's 8 episodes and they're doing 2 a week. So instead of, doing a 2-piece like we do with Acolyte, I think in 4 weeks or so, we'll follow up with a overview of the series and kind of how we felt and what we would have done differently. Absolutely. Just so, get a little A and B view.
Yeah, we could do it. Yeah. All in one fell swoop and give a nice overview of that. And coming up real soon, you guys know what is very exciting and about to release. Well, actually, it has released in theaters.
Yes. As of this taping, it's out. It's
We're gonna be back with Deadpool and Wolverine. Don't you worry.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for that movie. So excited.
I'm gonna get myself a popcorn bucket.
You're gonna get the.
I'm gonna have to. Yeah.
What about the? You've seen the Xbox controllers, right?
Okay. It's a one-off. It's a competition to win that.
Oh, is it really just a one-off?
It's not. If you could purchase that, I would have already bought it. I would buy the Deadpool Xbox controller, and I put it on the wall right there. Yeah.
So at first I was like, this is absurd. I don't want one of those giant, bulky original Xbox controllers. I didn't like those back in the day. But the fact that you can the butt is magnetically attached and you can remove it and use it like a normal Xbox controller, I was like, okay, all right, I can get behind that.
Can't use that. It's got to be on display.
Oh yeah, it definitely go on display. And I'd also love to see the Wolverine one. So
I saw a mock-up or something somewhere where it was like the claws coming out the back or something.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't think it was real. I don't think it was real.
Yeah, the one that I saw was just the same as the Deadpool one. It was Wolverine's butt.
Oh, no, I saw a mock-up where it was like his claws, I think, coming out of it. And I was like, that's ridiculous. And I love it.
That's yeah. But yeah, we'll be back with Deadpool and Wolverine soon. So do you have anything else to add as far as Time Bandits?
I do not. I think we covered all my changes.
Sweet. Same. I agree. That was it was a fun time. If you want to watch something that's just kind of like easy to watch and just silly entertaining, give Time Bandits a go.
Agreed.
Oh,
just make sure you bring your inner child with you.
Yeah,
otherwise you
definitely
may not have a good time.
maybe not, but all right. Well, Thank you all so much for joining us this week on another episode of We're Too Literary.
And like we said, if you haven't checked it out yet, give Time Bandits a watch. Then come back and leave us a comment. Let us know if you agree with our changes, if you think we're off base and fucking insane and perfect as is, or if you have your own ideas you'd like to share. We would love to hear.
Yeah, and don't forget, you can find us on all the major podcast platforms and right here on YouTube. If you're listening in, please give our show a rating. We'd really appreciate it. And if you're watching, don't forget to like and subscribe.
We truly appreciate you being here with us, exploring this film, listening to us share our takes.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to We're Too Literary this week. I have been your host, Kenny.
And I'm Jonathan.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye now.